I would say one of the biggest things is not trying to pretend like you know everything and not being afraid to ask for help. I think especially when you're new, even if you feel like, oh, well, I shouldn't be new and I'm too old to be new or whatever it is, that's a time to ask all the questions. I mean, I still ask a ton of questions.
Welcome back to the Data Bites podcast, everyone. Today, I have a very, very special guest, someone who we've been connected on social media for quite some time, and we'll probably hear about this a little bit later on in the journey and story. But I feel like I've been a part of your journey into data analytics for quite some time. But Colleen is probably one of the most inspiring individuals, not only from her transformation into data analytics, but previously was competed in CrossFit, was on the women's national bobsledding team, and also was a competitive athlete in college for swimming as well. And I would highly recommend following her on Instagram because even though she's in a data career now, she still does some amazing workouts and is just an overall inspiration. And so, Colleen, welcome to the Data Bites podcast. So happy to have you here. So today you are a senior technical manager of marketing technologies at CHG Healthcare, which I also started my career in healthcare. I think healthcare is a really fun place to be. If there's a lot of great data that you can work with in there. But prior to that, you've had this long career as what I would call like a professional athlete, right? In terms of what you've done. And I'm just curious, what type of mentality do you think it takes to be a professional athlete? And how is that kind of, I don't want to say infiltrated, but weaved its way into a technical career? Do you notice a difference in terms of maybe some of the way you propose problems or dive into problems that maybe others wouldn't?
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you just for all those amazing, sweet words. Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because if you had told me, I don't know, 6 years ago or when I was in college that I would be working in data analytics and enjoy coding every day and writing SQL, I would have never believed you in a million years. But what I've found being now in data for a few years is there's so many transferable skills from being a competitive athlete. And I think a lot of that is around work ethic, being coachable for sure, adapting, being resilient. I think, as you know, I think a lot of times when you're figuring out whether it's a data problem or figuring out some sort of strategy with a stakeholder, you're going to find a lot of different ways how not to do it before you find the right way. And I think because of years of competitive athletics where, you're kind of just head down grind mode for a long time and you don't necessarily, you're not aware of that day-to-day progress. You're just focused on putting in the work. And some days you feel like you might even be going backwards a little bit because it's so difficult. But you have your eyes set on a goal. So you're like, hey, I know I have to put in the work. I know I have to, sometimes it feels like I'm banging my head against the wall over and over again, but like, I know what I'm doing this for. And I think, and kind of putting off that instant gratification. And I think that's helped a lot, and not getting discouraged when, I don't know how to solve a problem, or if it's not working the first time, I'm just like, okay, figured out a way not to do it. So we'll, detour a little bit and we'll try it another way. And I also think just being able to productively work with others, that's a big thing. For me, I've always loved being a part of a team, loved being a part of something bigger than myself. Like, I remember my coach in college, used to say on our hardest days of practice, like, if you can't do it for yourself, look to the left and right of you and do it for them. And I think that's been really fun too. And something I seek out in my jobs is that feeling where no individual on the team is greater than the team itself. And we're all on the same team. We're all trying to move the needle in the same direction and, do our part, not just to make our team successful, but overall the company more successful and our customers. And so I think that's been really cool too. Because I think when I first got into data, I felt like, and I mean, I was from a technical standpoint of data, I was starting from very, very ground zero. But I think it's been really cool over the years to see where I can kind of lean into a lot of the things that I learned from competing in sport and bring them into what I do on a day-to-day basis, and learn stuff that, maybe may not work in the data world. I think, like, I talk to my brother a lot about this. He's in tech as well. And I think in, a competitive athletic career, there's a finite window that you're working with. And so by no, it's a grind for sure. And definitely, like, there can be longer days at the office and, crunching numbers and working with crazy data sets. But I think, going into this career, knowing that I want to be in it for a long, long time, there has to be a bit more balance there, because I don't want to burn out in any way. And of course, that doesn't mean that you don't put in the longer hours every so often. Like, you totally have to do that at times. Like, there's just no way around it. But I think just treating it more of a marathon and not a sprint. So yeah.
You and I both, I think, have shared kind of our maybe love hate for running. Maybe it's not our favorite, but that we do it and we get into it a little bit more. And yeah, there is a huge difference in how you train for a sprint versus a marathon, and I think that's so it's not that either of them you don't put in work, as you mentioned, both of them are work. It's just about how you pace yourself. I know it's especially in a lot of like EMOMs for CrossFit and whatnot. I'm always like, okay, Sadie, like pace yourself, right? Like just let's not come out of the gate and like put it all on the floor, right away, because you're going to be dead those last few rounds and going to really regret it, right? I think that's so important for us to remember too in our careers. So, I mean, we hear all and see all the time on LinkedIn the talk of burnout, and it's like, okay, but what do we do before we get to that point, right? The burnout is not what we want to do. How do we kind of pace ourselves? So how do you pace yourself in your tech career? Also being just like a driven person and someone who wants to strive and succeed. And it is such a long game. How do you, on kind of a day-to-day, weekly basis, pace yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, like you were saying, I I am a very driven person, very ambitious. I have lofty goals for myself, and left to my own devices, I will work a lot. And I've had to remind myself that, in order for me to show up my best to work, I need to, have other things outside of work. And so for me is really just spending time with people that I love. I've been in Utah for about a year, and there's no shortage of having lots of outdoor activities to do. I also think it's really great when I know for me specifically, I have a great, and I've been blessed with being on teams that really support that. And especially, I'm fairly new to CHG, but what I love is that I know they're going to challenge me. They have very high standards of what they expect of me, but they're going to support me. And it's not like we're throwing you into the deep end and you just got to go figure it out. They're like, hey, we care about you as an entire person. You're not just a robot that shows up to work every day. And I think that's really important because, and just having teammates, managers, leaders that support that, and just knowing that if you take care of that part of you, that you're going to show up better to work every day. And I think that's definitely been, and I think for me, I got into data feeling like I was quote unquote behind, because I got into it, I didn't come into it right out of college or anything like that, and felt like I had all this catching up to do. And so I was definitely like, I just need to put in all the hours and just grind and grind and grind. And I think at some point it's like, the work will be there tomorrow, and, I can still do a lot of great work, but I also need to take the time to step away. Because I think we've all had those days too, where you're staring at a query or some sort of problem, and it's when you step away that your brain is actually able to make sense of it. Like I've honestly had this where I'll be mid workout and I feel like I'm not even thinking about work or that specific problem, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I should do for that. And it's so funny how, like, you definitely it's hard, especially when you want to just get things done, but your body, your mind, like, need that, whether it's just getting up and taking a 10-minute walk, or just making sure that you can, like, put your work away for the day and go hang out with your loved ones, your friends, and do something that fills your cup up in a different capacity.
I could not agree more how important just that little bit of a break is, of like taking a walk. And, during the pandemic, I would say after, when it was still work from home, I fell in love with the noon workout class because it just recharged my brain and my body just enough to give me that, like, okay, I feel like I was able to restart my computer of my brain, right? And like halfway through, I'd be like, okay, excuse me, I need to write a note on my phone real quick because I finally just solved this problem. But it does wonders, instead of just like forcing yourself to power through something that, you know, maybe would take 10 minutes to an hour to solve. Forcing can get solved within 10 minutes, which is just, it's really incredible. So, but I want to go back into something you said, which I think a lot of people really feel similar, which something we call in women in data is our like career changers, right? You didn't come into data analytics right out of college. You had this amazing career before. But now that you're starting in a new industry, it does feel like, okay, am I like starting from scratch? And am I going to be there with like all the college grads? Like, yes, I have like 10 years, right, to catch up on. I think that's a common theme we hear from anybody, which I would label as like someone who's changed their careers. Uh, how did you get over that feeling of being maybe quote unquote behind, right? And realize that no, like I have all this amazing experience that I'm bringing. I'm not behind. If anything, I'm ahead because I'm bringing a new perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say one of the biggest things is not trying to pretend like you know everything, and not being afraid to ask for help. I think especially when you're new, even if you feel like, oh, well, I shouldn't be new and I'm too old to be new or whatever it is, that's a time to ask all the questions. I mean, I still ask a ton of questions, and I think um and that's, I think, one of the cool things about this field is that not everyone knows everything. And I think for me, it's about knowing when I don't know how to do something. I may not know how to do it or I haven't done it yet, but I know where to go in order to figure out how I'm going to do that. And I think that mentality is often overlooked. I think, and not to, I mean, there are lots of incredibly talented, technical, smart people out there, but I think it's often overlooked that just having that mentality of, like, yeah, I don't know how to do it, but I can go figure it out. And I know who to ask, I know what resources to look into, and that's not going to scare me from doing this. And I think shifting my mentality of, yes, I haven't done these exact things yet, but I've done a lot of hard things and I've worked really, really hard at a lot of things. So I can take that mentality and that grind mode mentality and shift it over to this. And I think it's been really cool. I feel like I've talked to more and more athletes that are, and more people that are trying to shift into this world and have that feeling of, well, I have no background in coding or anything technical. And I'm like, yeah, but you've done these other things. And I think that you got to give yourself some credit there and just know that you've done those hard things. So you can do other hard things, even though they look incredibly different. Like going to an NC2A championship swim meet looks a lot different than like setting up a new data pipeline, but but it's but it, and that's the thing. I think it's also about getting reps under your belt and not being afraid to mess things up, um, and finding environments where it's okay to fail. Because I think when you're in environments where you're walking around eggshells, feeling like just have to get it right. I think you and I both know that, again, like we were talking about earlier, it's not about, you learn a lot from getting things wrong. And I think that's just in life too, right? I mean, we don't love going through those moments, but in those moments, that's where it's character building. It's, you're, again, learning how not to do something. So I think just kind of going into it, not with the negativity of, oh, I'm going to fail at this, but just knowing like, hey, if I don't get it right the first time, that's okay. And so I think also in that regard, seeking out really good mentorship from people. Um, I know, like I remember taking your course. It was my first time coding ever. And I found your SQL course on Coursera. And I remember reaching out to you and just asking about, like, hey, I'm trying to get into this data space. Like, am I doing the right things? And I remember like my first manager at Homey just finding those people that have kind of been through it all and that can also, you're not going to avoid all the failures, but might be able to like help you avoid some common ones along the way, can be really helpful. So yeah, I think and that's the thing too. I think when you reach out to, whether it's mentors or just other coworkers, teammates and stuff, we all had a day one, right? And it's whether it was right out of college or 10 years after college, like everyone remembers what that felt like. And so um, I think that's the thing too, is it's easy to get in your own head thinking, oh, well, everyone thinks, I don't know what I'm doing and they're judging me and all this stuff. And it's like, if you find good people, like they're just going to want to help you because odds are they had someone in their career that helped them a ton. And I think that's what's really cool that I found in this space in particular is that need and want to like pass it along to whoever the next person is. Like I know for me, like I can't wait to help, the new person in their data career when I'm like, a few more years deep. And I mean, even still, I love when people reach out and want advice on any and all things. And I love getting advice from amazing people in my life. So, long-winded there, but I think all of that has really, really helped me kind of overcome that feeling of, oh, well, I'm late to the game and I'm behind and all of that stuff. And I think also spending energy or time in that mental space isn't really helpful either. I mean, whether you've been in it for a year or 10 years, it's like, well, that's what it is. So it's like, what are we going to do? What's the next play? What are we going to do moving forward? So I think just focusing on that and just really like you can never stop asking questions. And just, I think, especially in this field, just being curious is huge and just wanting to know why. And I think that's been really helpful. I also think, especially when you're new, getting to know other people on other teams. I think like just context building is huge. And even if you don't have a specific question for them now, like later down the road, it's so helpful. You're like, oh, I don't know, this field and this context, and it's really sales related. Oh, I remember I made friends with my buddy, Suzanne on the sales team, like on my first week. And I think that's so helpful too. Cause it can be easy to get like siloed within your teams and stuff like that. And it's just fun to connect with other people throughout the companies you get to work with. So
Yeah, I love that advice, especially that almost like beginner's mindset, because it's applicable whatever stage of your career. And particularly in this industry, as fast as technology is moving, like none of us are going to know it all. And there's something we can learn. And so just that idea of like continually asking questions, continually being curious, and then also like paying it forward to the next person that comes along on your team or whoever and reaches out to ask those questions, and having the patience to be able to answer them is just so key. So the other thing I wanted to follow back with your opening story was you mentioned like never in, I don't want to say a million years, but you wouldn't have seen yourself working in data analytics or even possibly known that this was something you could do, or coding. Where did it then even come from? Like, what was that first like aha moment, or like, hey, maybe actually this is a path for me or something that I can go into? Where did that journey start, and what was the first inspiration?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was living in Arizona. I was competing professionally in CrossFit, and I had gone back to school to get my master's in exercise science. And um, through that process, had just realized that that wasn't really my dream career anymore. So I was a strength coach at Cal after I graduated, and very, very grateful for my time there. It was a lot of fun. And was just starting to look at different career opportunities. And my sister-in-law is a data analyst, and I had started hearing about the field from her, and I didn't really realize that I was kind of already nerding out on a lot of data as far as my CrossFit career was going. As far as like, I'm such a geek for like all things wearables, and I just like looking at all the numbers. And so it was cool that I was already somewhat doing, some data collection and organizing and just trying to optimize my nutrition and recovery and all of that stuff. And so I was talking to her, and was so intrigued with just how much data teams are needed across such a wide variety of industries, and how much it was growing. And so it's like, I think this looks really cool, but I've never done anything like it in my life. I should probably look into the more technical skill set of things. And so found a remote program through ASU. And so did that along with some coding courses on the side, which is where I found your course. And it was a lot of fun. I really went into it very, I would say, intimidated, because I mean, I knew people who were engineers. I remember looking at lines of code and being like, oh my gosh, what is going on here? This is, I mean, it is a different language, but being like, I just so intimidated. And it's so, and I totally understand, like, and it makes sense, right? It's, if you don't know it, it can be incredibly intimidating. But I loved the problem solving piece of it. I loved the critical thinking piece of it. Um, and I love just getting to work with different stakeholders too, and really thinking strategically of, what are, what, what data points can we look at for, a team or a company to take action on. And I just loved being a part of that process. Um, and so that was kind of how I initially got into it. And my first job was at Homey, so was in kind of the tech real estate space, and that was really cool. And then went to Podium, a software company out here in Lehigh, and that was really fun because I got to wear a lot of different hats as far as different teams I got to work with. So that was really fun. Got to work with product, customer experience, finance, marketing, a little bit of everything. But but yeah, so it was definitely, again, not something I thought I was going to pivot into, um, but but very fun, and one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how once you meet somebody who like puts a name behind it, right? You start to recognize how like data's in every aspect of your life, and you're probably already a data junkie, right? Whatever it is, but having that first person to be like, wait, what? This is a career, not just like some device wearable. And then you start thinking about it and you're like, oh yeah, what it is. And like there's all this data that flows. And it's probably one of my favorite things is no matter what industry you're in or like what subject you really love, you can find data about that, right? And so whether you are into sports and want to do that, or nutrition, or you're into art or to movies and film, like you can be data put on top of it for any industry, which I think is such a great kind of bridge for individuals who maybe want to transition, is to be able to take that background with them. And so I love that you were able to recognize that and then just see like, oh, I am a data nerd and maybe always have been. I think it's also really encouraging to hear as well as that when you first saw all that code, like all of us were like, oh my goodness, this is a different world, right? A different language. Because I think there's any aspect that each of us do that people feel that way. I know when I went into my first like CrossFit class and was like, saw people lifting certain things over their head, I was like, you can lift that amount of weight over your head? Like, what did I just enter? This is a different world type of thing. And I think it's really important for us to always remember like that first aha moment we had so that we can be like gracious for others who are coming into the space with us as well.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And honestly, I think CrossFit helped a lot because, like you're saying, CrossFit is always evolving. They're always adding, new implements and stuff like that. And it's also incredibly humbling because you're constantly, there's so many different movements. And so I had a lot of practice of being really bad at things, and I think that's again something where, but I do think it took me a bit because especially I would say high school, undergrad, found it very tough to balance athletics and academics. And so just had this, preconceived notion about myself that I just wasn't good at school or anything academic related. And I would say it wasn't until I kind of realized that I could use those skills that I was developing in athletics. And even if it was in something like coding that doesn't come natural to me, that's okay. I can put in the work to get really good at this. And if I get stuck, I know where to go. And I think just realizing that those aren't mutually exclusive, that because I think, like you're saying, I think it's really easy to get in our own heads about, well, I'm good at this, but only in this arena. And it just lives there. And it's like, well, no, like give yourself some more credit. Like you can take it and apply it elsewhere. And I think that's just been a huge game changer. And I think especially it's really fun to continue to put yourself in places where you're being stretched and you're growing. Because I think that's the fun part. While it can be a little scary at times, I know for me, I kind of like when I'm in those spaces of, okay, I have no idea how I'm going to do this, but I know by the end of the day or end of the week, I'm going to figure it out. And I think that's when I know I'm in the right place because I am being pushed, I'm being challenged. Obviously, you hope not everything you get every single day is, oh, I don't know how to do this, but it's very, I don't know, I find that so fun that that where I feel like I'm in a career where I get to be challenged, get to be pushed. I'm constantly growing and learning. I feel like every day looks slightly different, which is fun. So you're never getting bored, which is awesome. And because I think that's something that I loved about athletics was I love the challenge. I love the push. And I get to do that just in a totally different space and arena. And I'm just so thankful for that.
Yeah, you're exactly right that there is this balance of we have to have some level of new in our life to push us to grow. But if it's all new, we like can definitely feel overwhelmed. I would love to see if there's like a study of like what's kind of that perfect balance for people. Is it like, 10 to 30% of like new challenging work, and then we need the rest to be stable. Because it is, I think, for others, if we don't have that new challenging, that's oftentimes when we get bored in our job or stagnant. And so it definitely is a balance that we want to have and strike within our career and just our life in general to be able to continue to have that growth. As we get close to wrapping up here today, having made the successful transition yourself, looking back, advice would you give to somebody who's on that brink right now? Like, I think I want to get into a more tech career in terms of data analytics. If you could do it all again, what would you focus on? And kind of what are those key like pillars that you would want people to know going into this?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely um, I would say that the program I didn't have a huge emphasis on coding. So I would say even if you find a program that doesn't, or definitely seek out a lot of that, especially if you're getting into data analytics, like live in SQL, do all the SQL. And I would say definitely study up on what, the latest and greatest tools are. I've definitely found that a lot of companies, they're going to continue to hire on people that have hours and reps in those tools that they might be about to implement or currently implementing. So I think that's a huge help. I also think networking is huge. I think especially in today's market where it's going to be really competitive, and especially I know for me, I was like, hey, I'm going toe to toe with people that have been doing this a heck of a lot longer than I have. So finding people that you've worked with in the past or that you have a relationship with that work at companies that you're interested in, even if they're not on a data team specifically, finding people that can speak to your work ethic, your character, stuff that you can't necessarily put on a resume, because I think that's huge. Again, because it's so hard to not just be another paper coming through. So I think that's huge. And then just giving yourself a little bit of obviously working hard. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's a tough field to get into. It's a lot of hard work. But I think that's the cool part, is that I don't know, I believe that that you put in the work in order to truly love your job. I don't think you just get handed jobs that are like, this is perfect and everything's great. I think you got to put in the work and continue to put in the work. And I think that's part of loving your job, is feeling like you're doing purposeful, fulfilling work each and every day. And I think there's something prideful to be like, hey, not everyone is doing this, because it is hard. And learning to find that balance to continue to do the hard work without, again, you don't want to run yourself into the ground either. But also along that way of doing the hard work, giving yourself some grace, especially earlier on, that you don't need to have it figured out, all of it. I think also, I remember when I first got into my first job as a data analyst, feeling like I had to know everything right away. I remember getting done with my first week and feeling like I'm in full support of continuing education and seeking out different certifications, different courses that you're interested in, just to keep adding value to yourself. But I remember getting done with my first week and feeling like, okay, I need to take this course and this course and this course. And just realizing that there's so much that you learn during actually doing your job. And that you don't need to, because a lot of times, like, there's so much great context you can take from reading and taking courses, but sometimes there's just going to be stuff that you have to learn on the job, and that's okay. And just to give yourself that grace of that, again, like we were talking about, like, you want to be here for a good time and a long time, not just a good time. So just to know that, like, it's going to be there tomorrow, just give it your all for that day and show up again tomorrow. And tying it back to fitness, like, just keep showing up. It's all about consistency, finding a sustainable pace, and again, just finding places that you can challenge and push yourself, and yeah, and just find good teammates to hold you accountable, and that you can help provide value to.
I think that's such great advice, really for anybody. I know I asked from a career changer perspective, but I think that's a great advice for anybody, no matter where they are in their career. I'm curious now, what's next for you? Right, you're landed in your career, you're established. What's kind of next on the horizon in terms of where you want to go or what you want to do?
Yeah, so I would say, I mean, especially being new in my current role, I'm really excited to um, be in more of a manager role and get to. I feel like I've learned so much from so many amazing leaders, and get to now lean into more of that, the leadership side of things, and being a little bit closer to the strategic side, implementation side, and while also staying very close to the technical part, because I just really enjoy that. So I feel very thankful and lucky to have found kind of the perfect spot for me right now, where I get to kind of be in the middle between staying close to all the tech fun things that I love, but also, I don't know, I love getting to talk to people, work on how to best leverage all of our data and models and everything. And so it's really cool. I would say that overall I'm excited to lean into more of that leadership role, and having a voice there. So yeah, and just continuing to try and be a sponge as much as corny as it sounds, just trying to soak it in every day. And I think, and as cheesy as it sounds, I think especially because for the longest time, I mean, my entire family is pretty much everyone's in tech. And I remember seeing, I'm the oldest of six kids, and remember seeing, I have they're all very, very smart. And, seeing my brothers and sisters in their, engineering roles, product manager roles, and, feeling like, man, like I don't think I could ever have a job like that. And not because I didn't want to, I just didn't feel like I had the skill set to do it. And I think even on the toughest of days, it's really cool to, walk up and down, walk to my desk at work or be at my computer trying to solve a query that I can't quite figure out. And just taking a step back and being like, man, this is really freaking cool. Like, I can't believe I get to do this as my job. And I think that's what, I don't know, and maybe I'm in the honeymoon stage of data, but I truly love that I get to do this, and I think it's a little bit surreal still that I get to, and yeah, I'm just excited to continue to grow more and more in my current role, and see where that takes me.
Well, I'm definitely excited for you, and it in a good way makes me feel old in the industry of seeing people who are like in the best way possible, right? It's like nothing more exciting. I remember when you reached out to me a couple of years ago, having taken the class and be like, "Do you think this is a good option?" I'm like, "Yeah, do it," right? And here you are now. So I just want to say congratulations again, and I'm so excited to see the next 5, 10, 15 years and what you accomplish. And thanks for taking the time to come and share your story and journey and words of wisdom, because I think this is really what it's all about, to see other people and go, oh my goodness, yes, I can do that too. And so I appreciate just the example that you said, and taking the time.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on. This was amazing.
It's been a pleasure. And a big thank you to our listeners. Remember to stay curious and keep learning. And we'll catch you next time on the Data Bites podcast. Bye bye, everybody. If you are enjoying the conversations you are hearing today, we encourage you to continue to be a part of the conversation and join a community of like-minded, extraordinary women. With our free community membership, you're stepping into a realm where learning, networking, and growth are at the heart and soul of what we do. Connect with Women in Data's global community and network with our chapters, all for free. But why stop there? Upgrade your membership with a special offer for Data Bites listeners by getting $20 off a pro membership in which you'll receive access to over 300 classes, leadership training, and exclusive events. If you're interested in mentorship and networking, we've got you. From monthly thought leadership webinars to exclusive networking events and a diverse on-demand mentorship program, the connections you'll make here are boundless. Join us and be part of a vibrant network. Dive into our book clubs, growth groups, and industry-focused gatherings. Women in Data is not just a community. It's a movement, a place where innovators, changemakers, and leaders come together to shape the future. Visit womenindata.org to join or use the special discount code in the show notes. Together, let's drive change one data byte at a time.